So before we do that, Rita, would you like to, since everybody knows where everything's at, they know where the coffee's at, they know where the bathrooms are. Huh? Do it opening too.
Oh. I can do that. Oh, feel like you're ready for whatever.
I'm ready. Welcome, everyone.
We should sing, dance, run.
So, let's take a beautiful, just deep breath together and relax. Oh, if we can just let go of everything that came before here and just be right here and right now in this moment only. And what I'm knowing about this moment is that it is the perfect moment. Because that power and that presence and that light and that love is right here where we are, right here where each of us is, both individually and collectively. We are together and connected in that one mind, that one spirit that is everything. And it is love, it is divine intelligence, it is power, it is light. And I know that tonight as we come here to just learn more about this great mystic, Ernest Holmes, I know that the night is perfect. And that everything that Reverend Patrick wants to say comes through him beautifully, with ease and with grace. That spirit is here in each of us and in him, and that everything is unfolding in all its perfection. And that it is a night where this information that is coming through is perfect for each and every person in just the right way. That's what I know. So I just let the evening unfold moment by moment by moment, and just allow it to be graceful and easy and fun and entertaining and enlightening, all of those great things. So knowing this is the truth and that I have spoken my word, now I just give great thanks in advance for all that transpires and just release my word as law into law, knowing that it is done perfectly as we affirm together. And so it is.
Thank you. And this is exciting because it's the first night of it, because I just came up with a new name today, and I want to make sure I say it. This is called the Meet and Greet New Thought Series. Meet and greet. And I was wondering, what made me laugh is I was thinking, I wonder if there's anybody who doesn't know Ernest Holmes, you know, that he's the founder, just doesn't know him and think that he was actually going to be here tonight. And you know what I mean? Then what can they go, and waiting for me to introduce him, you know? So what I thought I would do is just spend about 10 minutes channeling him. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Everyone's going, yeah, and watch the room fill up. So anyway, welcome to tonight, and we're really excited about this because each month we're going to do someone new. Next month, I believe it was empty, so we filled it in with Reverend Rita for Phineas Quimby. So we're going to, who is known as the father of New Thought in some areas. But what's been interesting about this wonderful man, Ernest Holmes, and the beautiful picture that Rob Jones painted of him, I just thought that what is, for me, all I kept hearing was, don't talk about me. I don't want to be talked about. You know, I'm already. I mean, because that was the way Ernest Holmes was. He was very humble, to a point where sometimes I thought to myself, you don't need to be quite that humble. And as I discovered more about him, he's a teacher, founder of this wonderful science of mind and spirit, teacher. The biggest thing that and speaker, and then speaker, and minister, kind of at the bottom of the list for him. He was a divine science minister, not science of mind, since obviously he started this, so he was not the minister. But what I realized that what he was, that I discovered in the last couple weeks, is what an incredible mystic and healer. I just got those God bumps. If I didn't learn anything, because what's really funny is during ministerial school, I missed the night that they did the big Ernest Holmes. So here I am 8 years later doing this Ernest Holmes. I think it's wonderful. But what I realized about him was that he was a healer and that he did not talk about it. Incredible healings, instantaneous healings that came out much after he had already transitioned. And he did that mostly, I believe, we'll get into this more later, I believe that he did that because he wanted us so much to think for ourselves. He didn't want anyone to turn over their power to anyone else. And we all know how difficult that can be. And so hello, welcome. As we know how difficult that can be when you want answers, to want to turn that over to someone else. And I kept thinking all through this time, the last couple of weeks, I said, why was he so humble? Constantly saying, I'm just taking everyone's stuff and I'm putting it together and blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, oh, it's because he was terrified that we would not think for ourselves. And that is what this entire philosophy is about being able to use the power. Of course, he started everything. There's a power in the universe for good, greater than we are, and we can use it. And as we have evolved, we use it because we are it. That was not a part of his, but Ernest, we're going on with the evolution, and that was what he said many times. If you're still talking the same thing 100 years from now, then something's wrong. Something's wrong. So I have a PowerPoint because I think they're fun. They keep us structured because I only have an hour. So if I started just to talk about him, I could take the whole hour. We were having some technical difficulty, and I went, no problems. There's about 3 weeks worth of Ernest Holmes living through Patrick Feren right now. So this quote says a lot of what Ernest Holmes, practically the whole human race is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told it to think. Would we kind of embrace that for a moment? I just want to make sure So we're going to go through this very interesting, he was born Ernest Shirtliff Holmes, January 21st, 1887 in Lincoln, Maine. Farm life, youngest of 9, which is hysterical because I found a picture, and I know that I'm going to say it ahead of time if you're one of those people that count and wonder why there's 8. I'm going to let you know right off the bat I haven't a clue. But I know that but finding pictures of people from this time period is not the easiest thing to do. But he was the youngest of 9 boys, and I have a feeling that maybe she lost one of the boys, would be my guess for that time period. But what's important about it was that his mother was a school teacher, father self-educated farmer, very intelligent, but they were very, very, very poor, which meant nothing for those days because there's a lot of people that they shared that with. He was raised Baptist with what I call a twist, because there was no fear and there was no devil. These parents raised him to feel. Can you imagine how great that was? They walked home from school. Was that? From church. They walked home from church, and every time after, she can't help herself. She can't help herself. When you're schooled together, and that's why we should have done Myrtle Fillmore. And so what they were walking home from church, and the father was so intended, their whole house, it was like a rule, there's no fear and there's no devil. It was, and they're Baptist. And so they would leave the church, and everyone would say, they had the pastor saying, your damnation, and this and that. And then he would come out and say, don't be scared, boys, about worms of the dust. He said, you are not worms, and it's a big lie. Jesus said, ye are gods and are like God if you keep it that way. Man was made by God. Any other story is a lie. 1887. Can you imagine in those days someone actually, your parents actually telling you that? So I think he was off to a good start. I'm going to use some of my things here too. Ernest Holmes was known as the eternal question mark. Once he knew that there was no devil and that he wasn't the worm that he was able to actually really start his quest. And if you had known him, people say, during that day, you would have never have known he was going to become, the man that he became years later. The eternal question mark, I liked it. I think it was Vincent Peale, Dr. Peale said, he said, you could not stay with Ernest Holmes for very long a period because he would ask you so many questions that you just wanted to run because he was so curious about everything. He was one of those people that talked so much about the other person. Like if you just said, oh, I do this, and you go, when did you do that? Why did you do that? And never argued about another's belief. Never. No one ever could find him. He would question you to the point where you wondered why you believed what you believed. Have you ever done that? And you know, and I personally have really learned from that, because I thought, he never really argued anyone, but boy, he asked you so many questions. And if you didn't know the Bible, he would let you know that, because his thing was who wrote it, and if they wrote it, somebody made a mistake, because it's not literal for him. In 1904, at the age of 17, and that's debatable because some say 15, Ernest Holmes entered a private prep school in Bethel, and began studying English, Latin, mathematics, and history. That didn't work for him at all. So he left and went and became a student of life. And boy, did he. I don't think there's a book that wasn't read by this man. He just kept going and going. So this is that infamous picture that we've all been waiting for. This is little Ernest in the middle. And something hit me today when I was looking at that picture. I thought, this little person with 8 brothers, but the youngest of 9, is the reason we're all in this room. I really let that land. Think about, this didn't happen, so we would still be doing our thing, but the reason that we're here is because of science of mind and spirit. So look at the ripple effect that one little spiritual being had as he started out. And I'm looking at all of you and thinking, we're in this room together because this man moved through his life and then met a whole bunch of other people, and they moved him, and then they met another whole bunch of other people, and we became ministers, and then we have it, and now we're here. So let's give it up for little Ernest. Yeah. So, is everyone familiar with our wonderful Ralph Waldo Emerson? I was not as much until I really got into ministry and into practitioner, and I had heard of him before, but I always thought he was too intelligent for me to understand, so I never really followed him until we had to. And his quote is, "Write on your heart that every day is the best day in the year." And why he's so important, and what I'm going to get through into tonight, is some of the influences that led that little boy, that little man, that man, with his influences that led us to be in this room tonight. And why it was so important, and how it wasn't just a divine revelation that came through this man, which I believe it did, but it was a lot of people that brought him to this teaching and this and where we are today. Okay, when he discovered, they said, a copy of Ralph Waldo Emerson's essays that I just saw Faith looking at.
There is a green Xterra with their inside light still on.
Oh.
A green what?
Xterra, I don't know if it's anybody's here. It's yours.
Great, thank you so much, and welcome.
Telling him.
So when he discovered Ralph Waldo Emerson, this is the part of this philosophy that I'm going to say right out of the gate is called the love. Because Emerson is so poetic and yet very much a very strong, independent thinker. Ernest Holmes, after he was reading that, Ernest Holmes' brother Fenwick, which is really funny because actually the only brother that's ever talked about is Fenwick, unless somebody has ever heard of another brother. But all those brothers, we never hear about them. They must have stayed where they were in Maine. And it was at that moment that life really began for Ernest Holmes. Emerson taught me that I must have faith and confidence in my own interpretation of the universe and my relation to it. And that goes for all of us. It's our interpretation. That's I believe Ernest Holmes it was his entire mission in life, is that we would be able to interpret for ourselves the life in which we're living and share it with one another and share our interpretations. And so what was interesting about him, and Rita and I were talking about this, because when I was younger, I had a little bit of fear of using my voice. I know you find that hard to believe all these years later, but it really was. And so he had this irritation that he couldn't get rid of that in his vocal cords. And so when it said he had a voice irritation, now that he wasn't afraid to voice his convictions, the throat irritation disappeared. That was the healing. That this Emerson allowed him to say, oh my God, these, it's like with this teaching sometimes, everybody thinks, oh my, you walk in and you go, oh, I was thinking the same exact thing, but I didn't know that anybody else was thinking it. And I think this is what was happening for Ernest Holmes when he decided that he had a voice now. It is easy, and Emerson says, it is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after our own. But the great man, woman, is he or she who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. Wasn't Emerson like this poet that just, once I got him and I wasn't fighting I have to be really intelligent to understand Emerson stuff that was going on, I melted reading Emerson. And this is what he did. He fell in love with Emerson. So as we're on our little journey, Emerson was really his first spirit, love, whatever it is guiding us. We say love leads the way and the law makes it so. And we'll find out later who the law is, but this is where he discovered who the love is that led his way. And so for the Emerson, Holmes embodied three ideas. We are our own spiritual authority. Everyone with that one? We are our own spiritual authority. There is a godlike essence in every person. This is where he thinks he became mystical later, but I believe by just researching and just embodying him that he was mystical when he first started out. I think there's a fear of that. I think we all have a fear we don't want to go too far out because what will people think or what will I think, really. And then the third one is there is some kind of connection between our thoughts and what happens to us. And as you get to know Signs of Mind and Spirit more, this is what we're based on, is that there is a definite connection that has never left us, and that's what we call spirit, life force, that is always moving through us. The PowerPoint, as it were. Now, little Christian Science. I didn't want to, Christian Science in Signs of Mind and Spirit, and religious science, kind of gets shoved aside a little bit because of Mary Baker Eddy, and yet, if you really, really read and really get to know Ernest Holmes, Christian Science had a huge effect on Ernest Holmes. But I got some of the comparisons just to show you why we did not stay connected as a organization, if you want to call it, but as a group of people. We went away from it, but yet our actual prayer, which we'll be getting into later, was really birthed a lot from Christian Science. Is the belief that the physical universe is not real. Now that's the belief of Christian Science. Science of Mind teaches that the physical universe is real, but it is derived reality and effect emanating from the true reality of spirit. So in other words, we repeat constantly, because we must, that it's not that we don't see things, they are real. But they're the conditions, they're not first cause. Spirit is first cause. Second cause is form, is material. The unique spiritual authority of Mary Baker Eddy, that was because Mary Baker Eddy wanted it to kind of stop there. If you've ever been in it, read the same book, there's nothing wrong with it, but that was it. It stopped it there. And Science of Mind and Spirit, and Ernest Holmes said, we will never be closed, ever. We will be open at the top. We will be open at the top. And so Science of Mind teaches that every person has the ability to reveal spiritual truth. I love this. Ernest said, no one whispered any revelation in my ear that is not available to every person. You're going to see through this time together that he constantly reminds us of this truth. That yes, some of us might hear it quicker, we might hear it before one another, but there is nothing that anyone back to Jesus, back to any, that heard anything that wasn't, that we're not capable of hearing. The idea of mental malpractice. Science of Mind teaches positive prayer and believes no one can do mental harm to anyone who is focused on the goodness of God. Does everyone, let me just explain a little bit of that. Malpractice, she believed that let's put it in just fun terms, that I could put a spell on you. I could get in your mind, I could do it. And yet, we've had brainwashings, we've had whatever you want to call it. But Ernest Holmes believed that no one could come in unless there was an open door somewhere, an invitation somewhere, even subconscious, right? In the subjective mind, you just kind of opened it up, or law of what we call averages. I don't know, whatever happens, happens. That type of thing. So she believed a lot, especially in the end, if you've ever read any of Mary Baker Eddy, towards the end of her life, for me, it really hit a heartstring for me because she really believed a lot of people were after her. And I'm always thinking, nobody was after you, but you get scared sometimes. I mean, look at what they were doing in those years. They were talking about things that people were dragged out of their homes for, right? And they were daring to say, I'm one with God, Father, and whoa. The authoritarian, number 4, nature of the organization and the rigidity in its publications. Science of Mind is open at the top, always ready to receive new truth and new information about